Chapter 22. The rain was really pouring down now, like the sky could feel what was happening to Cass and Deegan. He sat there, Cass shouted. He sat there today in class and he knew. She was bent over, hands on knees, genuinely dizzy with fury. He must have followed us yesterday. Deegan stood completely still in the rain, as if he was made of rock. And then he bought it. How could he? Even with all of her experiences with bullies, Cass had never imagined Ellis might go and buy the mask for himself. But now that the truth was exploding all around her like the rain, it started to become clear. He had certainly laid the groundwork carefully, stalking them, finding out that what they were looking for, learning how much it cost, and buying it before them, either yesterday or today. The dishonesty, the cruelty of it was more than she could handle. Rain and tears soaked her cheeks. Okay, we're going over there. Deegan stood straighter and shook his sopping hair out of his eyes. Where? Where do you think? Deegan's eyes were flashing. His house, of course. We're going to go and get it back. Cass's heart was beating so fast she could hardly breathe. He won't give it to us, she said, bent over still, trying to get air into her lungs. Oh, he'll give it to us. Deegan's voice was eerily calm, almost scary. Cass looked up. She thought suddenly of Deegan's aunt saying that if you weren't careful, you could channel the Orenda for bad things. The Otcon. What are you going to do? You can't hurt him. However much Ellis deserves it, she thought. I won't hurt him, Deegan said smoothly. We're going to have a talk. We're going to get to the bottom of this. Do you know where he lives? Deegan had already started walking. He's on your street. By the time they had reached Cass's street, the sky was darkening even more, and evening was approaching. Lights blinked on the big houses as family gathered together, safe and warm inside. Rich families, Cass thought bitterly. Ellis was rich. Deegan turned up a driveway that was running with rainwater. They trudged up against the rivulets. They climbed the rounded staircase to the front porch, where two elegant wicker chairs were set out. The chairs looked like they had never been sat in. Cass and Deegan stared at each other, half panicked and half determined. Deegan knocked loudly. It was a long time for someone's footsteps to approach inside. The outside light switched on, and a man's face appeared in the decorative glass window of the front door. The man frowned, then unlatched the door. Yes, can I help you? He was looking them up and down with profound distrust. Cass realized how unkempt and disheveled they must look, how sodden with rain. Is Ellis here? He might be. The man gazed at Deegan's long hair and the features of his face. What do you need him for? He has something, Deegan said, that belongs to us. We want to talk to him about that. The man frowned. What is it? A mask, Cass said, finding her voice. What, a Halloween mask? An Iroquois mask, a false face. She stood her ground against the condensation in his eyes. The man began to inch the door closed. Listen, this isn't a good time, and whatever you want, we're not interested. We're having dinner. Behind him, Alice began to walk slowly down the curving staircase. The man followed the direction of Cass's eyes and turned around to see him. Alice was moving cautiously like a cat, like he expected to have a run suddenly. In his hand, he carried the mask, its hair flowing over his arms. His father said sharply, What's that doing? What's it doing in our house? Alice froze, eyes on his father's face. You're not putting that piece of garbage in your room, his father exploded. You've got enough in there already, all those stupid doodads you keep making. Alice struck his jaw, but he stayed quiet. Cass was suddenly embarrassed to be standing there listening to this. Ellis's face was watchful, as if he expected to be struck. She knew how that felt. The last thing she expected was to feel sorry for him, but she did. That thing belongs to those kids, Ellis's father boomed. Ellis said dully but stubbornly, I bought it. But you knew it was mine, Cass blurted. Where did you buy it? Asked the man, ignoring her. Pawn shop. Ellis's father shook his head, disgust on his face. What were you doing in a pawn shop? Ellis shrugged. Deegan stepped forward. Cass's mother had to pawn it. We were trying to buy it back. Then Ellis went and bought it himself. Oh, said the man. He put his hands in his pockets and nodded. Then he blinked, a kind of mock confusion on his face. He leaned close to Deegan's face. Pardon me, but are you telling me you've come to our house at this time of night because my son bought something and you don't like it? Seriously? When do you people get to decide who buys your tribal stuff or whatever? He turned to Ellis. How much was it? Face drawn, Ellis muttered. $30. The man shook his head some more. $30 for that piece of garbage? Ellis said nothing. We want to buy it from him, Deegan muttered. Ellis's father said, Have you got any money? We have $35. Ellis's father opened the door slightly. Come here, he said to Ellis. Ellis moved forward watchfully, holding the mask tightly as if someone was going to grab it. His father gazed down at the mask as if it were some dead and rotting thing. He looked at Deegan and Cass, dripping with rain. 40, he said. We don't have 40, Cass cried, fury bubbling up. Ellis's father shrugged. He began to close the door again, this time for good. He turned to Ellis, now out of sight, and said, Get that thing away from me. Throw it out. It's not staying here. If you're throwing it out, why can't we have it for $35? Deegan asked desperately. Ellis' father looked at him impassively. If your people spent a little more time developing some business skills and less time drinking and carving this kind of stuff, he gestured to the mask, they might be a bit higher on everyone's radar. I don't mean to be unkind, it's just a fact. If you want this mask, you'll do something honest for it. He was forcing them back toward the rain and the night. The last thing Cass saw as the door slowly closed was Ellis's stricken face on the stairs, as if he wanted to say something quite different, but didn't, and wasn't given a chance.